It must be clear to everybody by now that most of the wars that go on in the world, and are certainly going on now, roads lead straight back to either Tel Aviv, Washington, or London. Why is it that it's this triumvirate which seems to be at the heart of virtually every conflict that's popped up over the last 30 years, perhaps 50 years? I can cite the latest one in Sudan, the genocide that's happening there. Clearly, the Israelis, the British, the Americans, and their frontman, the UAE, are involved there, and genocide is happening as we speak. They're the same usual suspects in and around Palestine and the issues that have been going on of genocide in Gaza. And of course, they were there in Afghanistan, same team. Go to Libya, same team. And move to Syria, same team. I could go on, the list goes on. Venezuela is currently live. Iran will become live again if it isn't already so. The reality is that there seems to be an absolute commitment from this triumvirate. Now, you call them whatever you like. You can call them the Axis of War, is what I probably should call them. I could say worse. But one has to be sick of this immorality, this barbaric lack of control, this desire to rapaciously resource rape every region they possibly can, and to impose death and destruction through war on any nation that doesn't. And it doesn't stop there. The war can also take the form of climate engineering. The war could take the form of bioweaponized murder as well. It can take the forms, as we've seen, of using water as a tool of control as well. All of these are weaponized realities, which many of the global south societies and nations that try to stand up to this triumvirate are inflicted with. And it's really the conscience of humanity that needs to question this. And of course, the conscience of those who live in the US and the conscience of those in Britain, and indeed those in Israel, should be at the forefront of asking questions. You elect these people into power. They're all democracies. So the question is, are we giving impunity to the likes of Israel in what they do? For example, they say that they abide by international law and yet don't comply with anything the UN says, don't comply with the ICJ, don't comply with the AIEA nuclear agencies, aren't a part of the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, refuse to abide by all international norms by violating ceasefires, which they enter and then go on to absolutely not adhere to. Lebanon has been suffering every day since the supposed ceasefire in terms of loss of life, loss of property and destruction. And the kinds of missiles and bombs that they're firing are not ordinary. They are experimental, powerful, new weapons. So there's a testing going on, and Israel either doing it or being used by the Americans to test these weapons out on ordinary civilians around these regions. Lebanon is braced for war because Israel is ready to try and punish the Lebanese resistance, which they first of all began to do by trying to coerce the rest of Lebanese society and certain fascist fronts within Lebanon to do, and have failed, essentially. And failure then means they go for plan B, which is usually either getting hold of ISIS Takfiri militants, in this case perhaps from Syria, where Julani, now Ahmed al-Shara with his trimmed beard and his enlightenment as a supposed human being after having been a head-chopping terrorist, he's just one case, ready to help his masters in the case of dealing with the Lebanese resistance, because Israel fundamentally failed the last time. They failed 3 times in Lebanon, and it's been because the Lebanese resistance is so stoic and so powerful. And we have to also question the morality of the wars which Israel and its partners in crime engage in. Is it acceptable that you use pagers, for instance, as Israel did in Lebanon, to hit the resistance regardless of whether they're children and wives and relatives or people, ordinary people in the bazaars where they happen to have been when these pages were detonated. Is that a morally allowable thing? If it was done in London, let me just put it this way: if the Axis of Resistance or somebody who wasn't into Western imperialism around the world decided to carry out an act like that, where tens of thousands of people with their pagers and their mobile phones were detonated, in which children, 5-year-old, 3-year-old, women, civilians, were all not only endangered, but actually maimed and murdered. Would that be acceptable? Is that a sort of thing that we would have an outcry about? I rather suspect it would be. But then, is it our moral relativism because we prefer to think of those which are close to us or are the same color as us or have the same culture as us or have the same nationality as us? Are we biased towards those sort of individuals, so it doesn't matter if a few brown people and a few Muslims or a few Lebanese are murdered and maimed by an establishment which is our ally, our puppet, or our master? I'm not sure what Israel is, to be honest, to Britain and America, but it certainly isn't a partner, an ally, or a friend that I would subscribe to as a citizen of this country. Yet here we are. Our politicians justify all of this and don't call terrorism out where it certainly is terrorism, because I would call that pager incident in Lebanon as terrorism. I'd call it out as Israeli state-sponsored terrorism, and it should be condemned, and Israel should have been, just for that one act alone, should have been made a pariah and should have been prosecuted at every level, boycotted, sanctioned. We shouldn't have any relations with a nation which thinks it's okay to do that. I'm, of course, ignoring the fact that you've all seen on your mobile phones incidents of little Palestinian children being sliced in two by the most modern, sophisticated ballistic missiles, or by the most modern, sophisticated, targeted AI-controlled, quadricopters, drones. Really specific targeting of kids, snipers to children's heads. All this has gone on in Palestine against the resistance there. No morality, no rules, no regulations. This is what the Anglo-Zionist imperialist axis has now basically opened up the Pandora's box for. It means that there's no rules and there's no way that you and I can talk about terrorists with a straight face when they maybe do the same thing on our streets, God forbid, So the reality is that we've given license to governments and leadership, which allows them to go around doing these actions, which are clear acts of terror by the very definition of the term, as it stands legally here in this country, certainly, and beyond. And yet we want to still point fingers at others if we get targeted. It doesn't wash, does it? So Lebanon is the case that I've used as an example, a legitimate resistance that's fighting for the sovereignty of its own nation, violated by an illegitimate entity forced upon the Palestinians, which occupies their land, and now has a dream of a greater Israel where they want to expand not just into Lebanon, but they want the war to be in Syria and to expand further, and already are expanding into Syria. They have designs on Saudi Arabia, the Sinai Desert in Egypt, and they want most of Iraq as well as tracts of Iran. This is the ambition of the Anglo-Zionist empire and its control. And you can blame Bibi Netanyahu all you like, but if you're going to boycott Bibi Netanyahu, then you ought to be also thinking about boycotting the people who are funding, financing, and supporting him. Because Israel gets its funding, finance, arms, logistics, intelligence from its prime backers, which are NATO, the European nations, but most especially Britain and the United States of America. United States of America to the tune of $4 billion a year. And of course, the rest, which they don't tell you officially, because people like Sheldon Adelson, private Zionist funding is also sanctioned by our governments and reaches Israel and maintains it to do its dirty work around that region. If you want peace anywhere in the world, one of the fundamental things is to stop war and stop the expansionist, imperialist wars, which our elected officials do. And also, you need to call out Israel and Zionism, which is the primary tool for creating conflict and warfare in that region. And of course, their Zionist Arab partners. I'm not going to omit the dictators and the monarchs who call themselves Muslims, but follow none of the virtue ethics of the Prophet and his way. Food for thought again, there is a problem of war and we are paying for it. Our tax money goes into it and we also profit from it as nations. It's unacceptable, and I think we ought to be working and doing everything we can to stop our licensing of arms to these sort of affairs, and we should stop interfering with other nations and their functionings. They live and let live and be fair, and stop doing things because you want to plunder resources around the world.